Okay, evening staff, evening counselors, that we have forum. I call this special meeting of council to order on the 17th day of March 2020 at 5 p.m. Approval of agenda. Motion put forward by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that the agenda for the March 17th, 2020 special meeting of council be adopted as circulated. Any comments to make on the agenda? Not seeing any. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that council receives report number 2020-0045 for information purposes. Mr. CEO, are you giving this report?
Yes, Your Worship.
You're on. Thank you.
Very good. Before I get into the meat of that, perhaps just for the record,
okay, the mics are on, so do our best.
For the record, we can indicate we have 2 members participating electronically and 5 physically present. That may or may not become apparent since this is being broadcast and people can't see that. But all members of council are participating, and 2 remotely by phone. Council, you have before you report 0045 from the Office of the CAO. In reality, all members of the senior leadership team worked on this report. We more or less, although it involves some thought leading up to the days before, we wrote it yesterday morning. In essence, we tried to offer you some detail from each functional area of the organization to sort of let you see what our operational plans are going forward and how it is we're going to attempt to maintain service levels, and roughly which service levels we anticipate falling by the wayside in the event of eventual staff attrition due to illness or quarantine, as the case may be, and what services we're going to try to protect to the very end, and what the strategy is around so doing. So generally, this is to sort of give you and hopefully the community some comfort in how we're going to approach operations for at least the next 3 weeks, if not longer. Time will tell, of course, but to sort of let you know what our thought process is and what the basic managerial approach will be. Probably of greatest importance, of course, is the water supply. The staff there are 5 individuals on staff who have the skills and licensing necessary to ensure that clean, safe drinking water is reaching all addresses within the town. And ultimately, for short terms, we can operate the system with 2 persons. And in the event that that we fall below 2, we should be able to rely on our neighbors for assistance in that service. But we have 5, and the minimum is 2. So in essence, that's where we're at with water. Generally speaking, we have contingency plans in place. We have coverage as best we can. Given our size, we have a lot of functional areas that are simply 1 staff member, and that's the sort of reality of being this. I sometimes equate us to that awkward teenager, neither fish nor fowl, neither very small town nor city. And at our sizing, we have some functions that have more than 1 person who can do the job, and other functions where we do not. And so those functions where we only have 1 person, certainly for a period of time, in fairness, the management team has been trying to double suit people or train backups, or at least give others some passing familiarity with the nature of the work that needs doing. And hopefully that will help us through this period. That's sort of my general commentary. I or the other senior staff are happy to answer specific questions, but the way we have the this special meeting designed is the report's here to hopefully give you some comfort, answer any questions you may have, but in and of itself, we think it's an information-only report. And then fundamentally, the draft bylaw, which is the next item on the agenda, is there to delegate some spending authority. Currently, senior staff have the capacity to spend up to $25,000 without specifically seeking council approval on a given item. We don't have any particular expenditures immediately in mind. We also don't know how long this is going to last. So the bylaw has been, I don't want to go too far down that item because that's next, but it has been drafted in the understanding and following the familiar path that occurs for lame duck councils, those that lose their some of their capacity to govern in the final few months of their term of office. So this has been used in many other municipalities for very similar purpose, although in that case it's a regular one. And so that's the action item for today, just to split the two, but very happy to take your questions and we will answer them to the best of our abilities. Thank you.
Before we go any further, I missed one little step on the agenda, and that was to ask if any councillors had a pecuniary disclosure, pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Not seeing any. Now we will take questions on the report. Councillor Hahn, and please, everyone, don't do as I do. Put your mics on.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, my question is in regards to taxes. So the next bill date for taxes is April 30th. So what is the plan, or has there been discussion in regards to extension?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, there hasn't been. I mean, there's multiple ways that people can pay their taxes. They can pay at the bank. They can drop checks off at the drop box. A lot of the residents do pay offline. They don't come in person to pay. So there isn't any consideration for that.
So further to that same question, the reason I ask that is not just the method of paying, but also to considering the extenuating circumstance, a lot of people will be laid off. So the financial hardship for some people to do some extra time in an allowance in paying. That hasn't been discussed at all.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, with regards to the taxes, they're only collected 4 times a year. So it's part of the town's cash flow. So it is part of just the money doesn't flow in on a regular basis. So this is how we have our cash flow and budget has been determined by that.
Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, and I want to thank you people for doing a great job on this report. These are very extreme times. I live it every day. I see the best of people and I see the worst of people in situations like this. I do have some concerns about the report, and I also have some concerns about the bylaw, but I won't ask questions. I'll ask 2 or 3, and I'll let my colleagues ask any more if they need to. But my first question is under the CAO part to Mr. Cribbs. You mentioned that you're going to have a backup every other month. You're going to choose someone else. Wouldn't it be better to have someone who's consistent? Like if this is going to happen for 6 months or 8 months, wouldn't it be better just to have one person in charge to be your backup instead of moving people back and forth every month?
My preference is the other way, which is why last year I instituted this format. There are 7 members of the senior leadership team here at the town of Pelham. When you exclude the CAO, when you exclude my position, there's 6. There happen to be 12 months of the year. It's equitable to sort of give everyone 2 months. Beyond that, it's a very good sort of managerial development, leadership development tool, so that every member gets an opportunity to grow his or herself and their professional capacities. We've been using that now for 8 months and change, and generally speaking, it sort of spreads the burden around. That's particularly, now you're right, if it was one other person, then presumably he or she would develop that skill more so than spreading it around. But in an instance such as this, I feel very good right now. I don't need to self-quarantine, and life is good. That being said, we don't know what the future holds, and any one of us can randomly get hit. And because now, as far as I'm aware, every member of the senior leadership team's had a chance to act, even if only for a day or two, as CAO. I have some reason to think that regardless of whom who comes down with coronavirus or has to quarantine him or herself, up to and including myself, we're well covered because we've sort of spread the risk around and we've spread the skill development opportunity around.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO again. Under Public Works Department, who is our neighbor municipality to provide these services if we're down to 1 or 2 people? Is it Welland, Port Colborne, Waynfleet? And are we communicating with them on a day-to-day basis?
I'll defer to our Director of Public Works for that question, if I may. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So our neighboring municipalities would be Welland, Port Colborne. We would work with any licensed operators that would be able to assist us. To answer your question, there hasn't been direct communication yet, but we definitely will take that under consideration and make those calls and start that dialogue.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to rest for a while until other colleagues have an opportunity to ask some questions.
Okay, Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just on item number 1, that the CEO and the treasurer or designates are jointly delegated as a financial signing authority for expenditures over $25,000.
Sorry, Councilor, we're just on the report right now.
Yeah, sorry, I'll come back to that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the report? Councilor Hahn.
Through you, Mayor. So this is for the Director of Public Works. Sorry to make you get up again. But knowing that the culverts and ditches are going to need to be cleaned before heavy spring rainfalls and such, just wondering at what stage we're at doing that, because we've had a mild few months or weeks, I should say. So assuming the crews are still able to do that, have we started that? Are we, like, what percentage kind of are we done? And considering that's not a close contact person-to-person type of role, will they continue on doing that for the foreseeable future?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I can't speak directly to what the percentage we've completed on cleaning out culverts. I know this is a function that our operations crews undertake under normal operating procedures. This season, yes, mild winter. We have been out previously to this event to clean out culverts and ditches, and will continue to do so. At this point in time, just the general nature of our operations crews, they do work in small groups, not in confined spaces in the open, and we plan on continuing to operate in the same fashion and manner that we normally do.
So have they started doing cleanouts yet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, prior to the recent rainfalls that we've had gone out and cleaned out catch basins and culverts. It's something that we will do as part of our normal operations and maintenance when we're not plowing snow. Obviously, that's it's a specific item, an activity that our crews can do. We have been doing it, but yeah, we will continue to maintain and our culverts and our ditches.
Any other questions? Councillor Corr.
To the CEO, dealing with the MCC, is the ice being removed or the ice still in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, from our meetings this morning, they're going to remove the, let me get this right, the smaller arena, Doulaban. They're going to remove the Doulaban ice now, and then because it's, for maintenance-wise, it's recommended that you remove the ice and let it sit for a period of time. It's better for the building itself and the pad. And then they're going to put the ice back into that for that to be the summer ice pad. And the big arena, they're going to take the ice out and leave it out for lacrosse.
So if I'm not mistaken, in your report, it's closed. So how are we opening it?
Sorry, for clarity, it's closed to the public. We have staff working.
Yes, I understand that, but we were just mentioning that you're going to have lacrosse in there.
Well, then, sorry, for further clarity, it's in the anticipation of eventually this virus passing and at somewhere during the summer months, which is the lacrosse season, lacrosse getting underway. We don't know when that might be, but I lack expertise in this area. I do understand that it's somehow better for the building to not constantly maintain, and of course, there's a huge energy cost, so we're looking to try to reduce those costs, but it sort of needs some chance to rest is my non-technical term. So we are planning to remove ice from both and eventually put ice back into the smaller of the two, and the larger of the two becomes home to lacrosse should lacrosse be able to proceed.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, but if we still have issues until September, we're not going to do it, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the question I also have is how much staff and what is the number of hours are we going to be saving if there's no ice, no rentals, and we're not using the building? And I know in your comment you said about painting. That's a lot of painting for a year-and-a-half building.
We are nowhere near capable of answering that question at this point in time. We know we can save money if you're not spending. Creating cold and refrigeration is a huge energy requirement, and so needing far less of that presumably leads to some savings. I can't tell you whether that'll offset labor costs or where we've just been really working and focusing on operational issues and health and safety stuff. Ultimately, we will be able to answer those questions. They're fair and appropriate questions, but today we cannot. And
Okay,
I
a couple more questions. I'm sorry.
Certainly.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is there going to be any possibilities of, or is there going to be any layoffs in the town? With
Those
staff?
None are anticipated at this time. Most of us, of course, are operating on the assumption or the hope that operations can resume in early April. Almost every public organization has used the first week of April is the date when schools at the moment are hoping to be able to resume. The town has been very careful in its public news releases not to specify an exact date, but of course, schools drive a heck of a lot of how the rest of society acts and reacts, whether it's from needing to supervise children to, obviously we start with them from the safety analysis. So I can't tell you what might happen 3 or 4 months from now, but at the moment, no loss of employment is anticipated.
Okay. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO again, the experts are telling us that this virus will be here until August or September, but we have events with the band shell, we have the Summerfest, and we also have the farmers market that we didn't mention in your report. What strategy are we moving with that? Are we going to cancel it? Cancel those events?
At this point in time, it seems premature to cancel those. Obviously, we're keeping an eye on the calendar, and we're going to wait and see. No one really knows how much we're going to ultimately flatten that curve as a society. And even assuming the curve gets flattened, you also notice that means it carries on for a period of time. What an acceptable level of risk will be to hold large events like that into June, July, August, what have you. So we're certainly monitoring. Right now, in the middle of March, at a start of an outbreak, it seems premature to cancel significant events in May and June. But obviously, that will come on the table if the outbreak gets worse or this carries on for a long period of time. We're not a week into this thing, and all I can say is we didn't want to cancel them now and absolutely throw out the baby with the bathwater. We're hopeful. Obviously, we're all hopeful that this passes as quickly as possible. We can get back to living well. But so at the moment, it struck all of us as premature. But we're certainly we're not dead to the issue. And if we do have to cancel those, we'll certainly do those with the month. Well, we'll either come to council or again, assuming we're having meetings. There's that too, of course. But I think it'll be fairly clear to everyone whether it's prudent or not, and we'll make appropriate decisions in the future.
Any other questions on the report? Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mayor. So in this, it alludes to kind of bouncing staff from working at home and for a time and coming in and going back and working at home. And you're nodding, so it's in there. So from an infectious disease perspective, that is counterintuitive in that you have a controlled environment where you have your family, and after so many days, you are aware that 14 days pass, you're feeling fine. And then you're taking them out of a controlled environment and putting them in an uncontrolled environment, whereby then you've got people who you don't know where they're at. You don't know, their families and what they're doing. So you're bouncing back between controlled and uncontrolled environments. Can you explain to me what the rationale is for doing that?
Your basic point is accepted, agreed upon, and I think fully appreciated and entirely valid. So we aren't intending to just flip someone out every day. We have some modest amount of redundancy, and we're understanding, or we're told to be planning for 30% of our staff to become ill. So what happens if 30% of the staff becomes ill? Well, right now we have staff physically spaced. We have virtually all of our staff working, and they're spaced so as to have 6 feet or better apart. But one would anticipate that in the weeks to come, some of our staff will become ill or will have to self-quarantine, but not necessarily be ill. And at those points in time, one would assume the distances will grow even farther apart as there are fewer people in the same amount of real estate, and that we may be able to bring people in who are currently at home. But the idea is not to haphazardly swap people around and create risk. If we have people working from home who are capable of so doing, they'll continue to do so. And at the goal is to prolong our capacity to provide service. And whether that's the A team or becomes the B team or the C team, we're going to do the best we can to offer as many of the services as we can. And the report sort of identifies the critical services that will be protected till the very end in a worst case scenario. So we're alive to that. If it sounded, it probably just comes down to the time we had to draft that. I didn't mean that in a flippant way that we were just going to trade people like baseball cards or plug them in or out. That's not the plan. Certainly, though, the capacity to have people work from home right now is a good thing and ultimately should increase our capacity to keep people in the building, whether they're the same people or not, for a longer period of time. That's the goal.
One more question through you, Mayor. And this just goes back to the due date for taxes. So just so I understand, of course, there's going to be electronic means to pay taxes, but because we have a very high senior population, we can't assume that they all have access to electronic means to pay taxes. So can you just go back to the other options for folks that don't have electronic means to do that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, people can pay their taxes at the bank online, so they can go to the bank and pay.
If the bank is open, yeah.
Yeah, but they can pay online. They can pay. They can drop a check off. There's a box outside that you can come and physically drop a check in the box, and then we can pick it up and deposit it. So those would be the means that that you can make your payment.
So further to that, then, could I please ask that in the coming weeks with the paper, that we make it really clear for folks that read The Voice or Tribune or what have you, that it's very clear how they can go about doing this? Because forward thinking, I'm going to expect that some of the senior population that may, or it doesn't have to be senior, but anyone who doesn't have means to electronic, and if the branches will likely also to close, then that limits maybe the way that they would normally pay, so that they know they have the option of a check, that's
Right.
something that we
And
can.
we also have that on our website, but we will highlight that.
But if they don't have a
Actually-
computer, they can't look at the website, right? That's my
right.
point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and also what we can do with the box outside, maybe we can put a sign on there so it makes it clear where to drop it off.
And
So
then-
that's a good point, thank you.
And in the paper too, just so they can, it's very
Yes.
clear that's an option.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Sophie.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Under the clerk's office there, council and committee meetings, there may be a need to suspend council and committee meetings if the town is mandated to do so by the provincial or federal governments. If meetings are not suspended, there is a potential to not achieve a quorum. I'm really concerned about this one as well, with council meetings, decisions that we have to make, but also with our Cannabis Control Committee. We've done all this work now, and then July 15th is going to be here before we know it. Is there a way of having meetings online through Skype and being able to vote with that as well? We're near the finish line now. And our chair of the Cannabis Control Committee has talked about delays and delays since last year. And now we have a significant issue in front of us that could cause a major delay. And if we get past that interim control bylaw, we're not going to be in a very good position.
There are a few answers to Councillor Chofie's question. At the moment, as the law stands, we do need 4 of you to have lawful meetings. So over the coming months, in the event some of you become ill or in the alternative have to self-quarantine and still be healthy, so long as we can keep 4 of you coming or 4 of you get healthy enough again that we can hold meetings again, we'll be fine. That's as the law currently stands. We're hoping for some relief from the province. We are not alone. I have information from multiple municipalities that they've reached out to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and made more or less the same plea. We all find ourselves with the exact, different numbers, but more or less essentially the same problem. So at the moment, we do require 4 of you here physically, but we could run a meeting with 1 clerk or deputy clerk, as the case may be, and 4 of you. So we can get this down to as few as 5 human beings in this room. And we have, one of the things we're asking you to do is name my position, deputy clerk, so that we have 2 deputy clerks and a clerk, so that it's spread around 3 of us. 3 opportunities to have the 1 critical staff member you need for you to be able to have a proper meeting. So that's where we've got in less than a week so far. We've asked the province for relief from the rules. I think they're seriously considering that because it's 444 municipalities that have a problem. And even if we do lose our quorum or our capacity to have quorum, you just have to regain it prior to July 15th. In the absolute, I want to be careful how I say this. The Cannabis Control Committee continues to work on advice, bylaws, and potential amendments to the zoning bylaw and official plan. The staff equivalent is already completed and has been presented publicly. So your very worst case scenario, you do have work product that your staff, including myself, feel is adequate and appropriate to the task. I have no reason to think that members of the Cannabis Control Committee are going to be incapable of producing work for the coming months. But your insurance policy is that there is a new potential regime, should it meet with the approval of council, available and already on the shelf. So I have every reason to believe that even if everything goes wrong, there's still a viable path forward that would at least temporarily on an interim basis work adequately well.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Last week, we had our consultant, our planning consultant at the Cannabis Control Committee, and they're coming up with ideas, and they're even asking staff for some reports that should receive this week. I'd like to continue on being able to move forward with this. Is there any way that the Cannabis Control Committee can still carry on, even at a minimum of 10 people, and spread out possibly in a room at MCC?
Ultimately, council controls its process and the process of its advisory committees. So council can make the determination that, for instance, the only committee that carries on is the Cannabis Control Committee. That is your right and privilege. At the moment, the staff had, our vision as far as minimizing numbers and attendance, et cetera, was to stop sort of all function except this body from meeting, and depending on what this body decides for itself, tonight you can choose to have no more meetings. Some of the Niagara area municipalities have decided that their councils won't meet either, or you can choose to carry on. If you choose to carry on, you can assign some of yourselves. You can decide that only 4 of you will physically attend, and you could discuss that amongst yourselves, sort of take turns or what have you. Not for us to dictate who attends or not, and the others could participate electronically. We'll have Skype up and running for future meetings if that you so choose. You can also choose to have the Cannabis Control Committee continue to meet. We strongly advise against you endorsing anything that involves more than 10 humans in the room, and that committee frequently has more than that around the table. Staff could react appropriately to that. We'd have to exercise some sort of discipline or control over the committee so that it did not exceed those numbers. But we are physically capable of offering the current meeting space that's used can be spaced so that people are more than 6 feet apart. That is feasible.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's a question to the CEO. I'd like to go ahead with that, and I don't know when the appropriate time is to put that through. And the Cannabis Control Committee would do everything possibly to work safe, put nobody at jeopardy. I would also recommend, instead of having the current meeting place as Station 1, to keep it, maybe possibly go to the MCC, a larger room, where there also is drop-down screens and some of the members could Skype in just in case. And then we can ensure that the safety of everyone is met. We want to make sure safety first. But we're so close to the finish line, we really need to keep going with this.
So Councillor Chartfee raises an excellent point. To the extent that some meetings with members of the public may be necessary in the weeks to come, for various reasons, are essentially unavoidable or can't just be done by email or telephone. It's our intent, and since we are intending to only meet with people by prior appointment, we intend to hold those appointments at the MCC because, for exactly the reasons you mentioned. It's wide open spaces, it's purpose built. It's very, very clean. You walk into that building now, and what you smell is antiseptic and clean. Better than a hospital, not as good as mom's home cooking, but it smells. You're in a clean place. Those rooms are relatively easy to clean, and of course, so we would use the upstairs meeting rooms that are fairly spacious, I would describe them, and and of course we wouldn't meet with, it'd be 10 people or less, no matter what. So that is the appropriate location for those sorts of meetings. We are trying to keep the fire halls no public access, so that those really have to be protected, so that we can bring our volunteer firefighters in when we need to have serious calls for service, and we can't contaminate them. So that is how that would occur if that's the will of council.
Would this be the appropriate time to put a motion forward then?
If I can suggest, if I may be so bold, that maybe council finish what, or perhaps is the last question, I can't say, but ask whatever other questions you have about operations. Bring a motion, or I guess you brought the motion, vote on to receive as information only. That's closed off. And then any one of you could bring a motion to say temporarily cancel all advisory committees, save and except the Cannabis Control Committee, and ask that its meetings occur at the MCC at prearranged times, and that those meetings shall include no more than 10 persons. That would be a reasonable motion if that reflects your will appropriately. So I'd simply vote on receiving this whenever you're done your questions, and then that would be an appropriate time, if I may.
Okay, so maybe at this time we'll ask the two councillors that are on the phone. First of all, Councillor Hildebrand, are you still with us? Do you have any comments that you would like to go on record with the staff report? Okay, thank you. We'll go on to Councillor Wink. Are you still with us?
I did hear one beep, so he may have left me.
Okay, so we seem to have lost Councillor Wink. So we'll go around the table horseshoe one more time. Is there anyone with any last questions on the staff report before we put it to the vote? Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mayor, this question would pertain to a committee or a commission, actually, and that is the Airport Commission. So the Airport Commission is very keen on, obviously, the region's intent to do a possible takeover. That being said, now with things being the way that they are, do we know if they're moving ahead with their meetings, or have they postponed, or what is their schedule, I guess? Because I wouldn't want, of course, us not to carry on with commission meetings, which clearly at this juncture we're thinking of not doing, but at the same time the region moves ahead and they get that much closer to, so you understand my concern with syncing things up. Can you tell us anything more about the region?
I cannot. Possibly his worship might know, seeing as he actually sits on the regional government.
So we have a emergency meeting this coming Thursday at 4 o'clock, and at that time we will be deciding what we are doing as a council in future meetings for the rest of the summer, and I could report back to council Thursday night. I could report back to the CAO. Any other questions? If not, then we will, I'll call the issue, the vote on this. Read it one last time. Be it resolved that council receive report number 2020-0045 for information purposes. All those in favor? All those against? Motion carries.
Before you move on, you have Councillor Chofie with a question?
Yes. Oh. Councillor Chofie.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put a motion forward at this time to allow the Cannabis Control Committee to continue on with their meetings to be held at the MCC in a large space so nobody is in jeopardy, and to have a maximum of 10 people attend.
And do you have a seconder for that?
I will second that.
Councillor Kaur is seconding.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I also had included in that motion that I've started drafting that other members may attend via electronic means.
Yes, sorry, correct. Now, will other members, sorry, just to clarify that, other members that attend through electronic means, will they have the privilege to vote? We have 7 cannabis control members that are voting members, and let's say 5 of them are there and 2 are electronic, can they vote through electronic means?
Councillor, in the default, the council rules apply at our committees. So as a default, yes, that would in fact be the case. If you'd like extra surety, you can certainly add those qualifying words. As I've been sitting here thinking about this, perhaps we might want to amend or add the stipulation that one of those 10 be a staff member. You really aren't supposed to have advisory committees that don't
absolutely.
involve. So 1/10 of those people should be on corporate payroll. Beyond that, that's the only stipulation I thought I would add. Madam Clerk may have thoughts of her own.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have the procedural bylaw in front of me with regard to electronic attendance at meetings, and it does clearly state that a member participating in a meeting by electronic means is deemed to be present at the meeting. So they will have voting rights, they can make motions, they can vote. They are just not counted as the quorum pursuant to the Municipal Act.
Okay, so we need 4 members to be there to have an official meeting out of the 7. Okay, understood.
So, if I may again, the other reason staff anticipated all advisory committees being canceled is that there is generally a requirement that these be open meetings to the public, and we don't have a technological mechanism to make that so at the MCC. So keeping in mind that these would be public meetings from which the public is barred, we're going through that unfortunate situation here tonight. The CCC has a sort of unique mandate and is uniquely likely to be reviewed in the future, its actions. So it would probably be helpful if council, if you considered a further amendment or further language to the motion indicating that only because of extenuating circumstances, will the meetings be closed to the public, and it's not the town's intent to prevent or prohibit members of the public from being able to make electronic submissions or words to that effect, so as to preserve proper process as best we can.
Would there be a possibility of hosting the meetings here so they can be televised?
Well, I would strongly advise against that. We've tried to close this building to the public for a very specific reason, which is the health and safety of all your staff. And in the event that a public member of an advisory committee came in and infected the rest of us, we devastate all of the other town services. Potentially, the risk of that is far greater than whatever reward may bring, keeping in mind that there is a fail-safe option. The option B is available. So I can't endorse that, although, of course, council can proceed as it prefers.
Madam Clerk, can you please read the motion with the amendments, and then I can digest it, please?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I have so far is a motion by Councillor Cholfie, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that council suspend all advisory committee meetings save and except the Cannabis Control Committee, and that the Cannabis Control Committee be directed to convene at the Meridian Community Centre and recognize the required separation distances, and having no more than 10 people in physical attendance, wherein other members may attend via electronic means, and that one of the individuals present be a member of staff.
I like the idea of them being the public meeting. Could we evaluate the risk of having 10 people in this room and having that meeting? Like, I understand a member, but I know the 7 members on the committee have the well-being of the municipality and of staff. And I don't think they would jeopardize anything.
Our problem here is that intent is irrelevant. Right now, I feel very well, but I could well be carrying the coronavirus and not know it, be asymptomatic or not yet symptomatic, right? I could come down with it tonight. Allowing more people into this building is not in the community's best interest. It's not just that there's any one of us, but if the illness enters this building, it's highly likely to take down 6 of the 7 senior leaders of the corporation, and at the risk of sounding self-important, we can get by without any one of us. We have plans in place if 2 or 3 of us go down. But if you take out the entire team inadvertently, I think that's catastrophic for the corporate purpose. We believe, although we don't know, that the province is considering extending deadlines under the Planning Act and other relevant provincial legislation. The way out of all of this for us is for Her Majesty to move the ball down the field, or move the goalpost further, I guess is really what I'm trying to say. Because they're huge. I mean, it's problematic for the municipality. We're zeroed in on one issue, but that essentially replicates itself in all sorts of various guises across Niagara and other guises just for this corporation. I'd like to give the province a little bit of time. They're not a week into this thing either. Some more time to consider that. At this point in time, I don't think we have to go there. And to reiterate, there is an entirely rational, connected, thought-out plan. It's a plan B, but it is one that staff endorsed that council could enact for a period of time if needs be. So there's not desperation here. We don't know if we're talking about a 3-week shutdown or a 5 or a 6. We can react to that differently. There is a procedural benefit to canceling all advisory committees. There's a lot of work that can still be done. A lot of that work is paperwork that isn't done right at the committee table. By definition, it can't be. People are working through documentation, and that can continue, and the staff advice and the staff work can continue as well in the background. So it's not like there'd be zero productivity. I just think at this point in time, I'd like to strongly caution against that course of action, and maybe we reconsider in 3 weeks or 2 or 4 when we know more and we see where we're going.
I'd like to go ahead with the motion that was put forward for now at the MCC, and it's just because next week we're going to be receiving the second draft by our planning consultant, and I think it's very important. The time is ticking here, and it all comes back. Like last year, we said, extending it another year, we won't need it, and unforeseeable circumstances come forward, and here we are, middle of March, and the clock is ticking, and there's still a lot of work to be done. It's a shame that we've done all this work up till now, and it could be jeopardized. So I know you keep saying Plan B is on the shelf and ready to go, but there was a Plan A on the shelf last September, and it was nowhere near ready to go. There's no disrespect for that, but we have to look at the best interests of the public here and to mitigate all the adverse effects that are being caused. So I'm going to go ahead with my original motion for now.
So I will support the original motion. I definitely would not support opening this building up for any circumstances for at least the next month to any member of the public for whatever. We're one of, I think the CEO can correct me, at least 6 other municipalities have got complete lockdown in their facilities, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. We just can't. The approaching tsunami that we are facing. If we can keep this this building as clean as we can under the circumstances. That is our number one priority.
Understood, Mayor Junkin. That's why I made the compromise, and if we can carry on with our meetings at the MCC in a safe and manner and protect everybody involved, but so we can keep moving forward.
Any other comments on on Councillor Trophy's motion? Not seeing it. Perhaps one last time, Madam Clerk, you can read it, and then we'll call the vote.
Be it resolved that council suspend all advisory committee meetings save and except the Cannabis Control Committee, and that the Cannabis Control Committee be directed to convene at the Meridian Community Center and recognize the required separation distances and having no more than 10 people in physical attendance wherein other members may attend via electronic means, and that one of the individuals present be a member of staff. If council wishes, I could add during the pandemic period, so it is not forever.
Yes.
Any other comments on this motion? Councillor Stewart.
Question for you, Mr. Mayor. So if we put this, through you, Mr. Mayor, if we put this motion in place and then tomorrow the federal government or the provincial government bans all meetings, then what happens? Then just everything gets suspended?
Well, in a legal hierarchy, we place third out of three. So in the event one of the other orders of government makes such a declaration, it will nullify the council motion and ultimately the bylaw that would be passed as a result of your motion, and we would simply comply with that.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions before I call the vote? Not seeing any. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Don't see any. Motion passes.
Vote Councillor Hildebrand.
Should we get Councillor Hildebrand?
I would vote to approve the motion.
Okay, and Councillor Hildebrand is on record as approving the motion. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay. Consideration of bylaws, Madam Clerk, is that where we're at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, a bylaw has been prepared and presented for council's consideration.
Motion put forward by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Trophy. Be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw 4215-2020, being a bylaw to delegate authority to the mayor, the chief administrative officer, and various municipal officers or departmental directors or any of their designates for certain acts during a pandemic and or other emergency period. Any further questions, comments on this bylaw? Councillor Trophy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. There's a lot of items there, like 1 to 12. I personally would prefer to go through each item, if that's possible.
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is certainly appropriate to divide the motion. You could discuss and vote on each section separately if that's council's wish.
Okay, and Councillor Kaur, you had your hand up.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, I won't support this. I know the CO sent a letter or an email earlier today saying about a lame duck. I didn't get elected to be a lame duck. And I think it's too early to be in this position. And I think the CEO mentioned earlier that we're at the beginning of this process. If it changes, I have no problem supporting it, but at this time, I will not support this bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Trophy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, then that would support the reason of going through this item one by one and vote on each line, if fellow colleagues would approve that.
Hey, Madam Clerk, do we need a vote on that, or do we just do it one by one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a request to divide a motion is simply a request. So you would need to just introduce each section of the bylaw and vote on each section, and I will track what is approved and what is defeated.
Okay, so council, that is what we will do then. We will go through it one at a time, and we will vote on them individually. So the man, thank you.
To the clerk, can we have a recorded vote on each one?
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will read the first one, and then we will debate and discuss that. Now, therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Pelham enacts the following as follows: that the CAO and the Treasurer designates are jointly delegated as the financial signing authority for expenditures outside the current budget exceeding $25,001 as contained in the Town of Pelham procurement bylaw for pandemic or emergency-related expenses that are deemed reasonable under the circumstances as determined by the CAO and Treasurer, and that Section 23(2) of the Purchasing Policy Procurement of Supplies and Services is hereby suspended relating to council approval. So discussion, questions on motion one. Council Trophy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. This question will go to the CAO. I understand where it's coming from and that emergency could come up, but in your opinion, do you think there should be a limit on that?
So this is, although the pandemic we're experiencing is not routine, this language, this approach is routine and happens in municipalities around Ontario every 4 years. Understand that the request here, it's true it would allow any two individuals named therein, really you're talking about the mayor, assuming he's still healthy and functional, or myself and the treasurer, myself and the clerk, as the case may be, to sign, to make expenditures that aren't currently budgeted. We will not exercise that power if this council continues to retain its competence. We certainly hope, and we should reiterate, there are no known cases of coronavirus in Pelham. Right now, we have almost 18,000 people, all of whom are either healthy or don't have coronavirus at any rate. This is the option that allows government to continue in your absence. If you read the bylaw conjunctively at the end, as we would in a lame duck period, we would report anytime money was spent. And right now, understand, there are no anticipated expenditures of money. We don't need a new snowplow. We don't need a new fire truck, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't tell you what we would use that power for. But in the end, in the event that so many members of council become incapacitated or unfortunately die, this will allow the corporation to continue on its operations with some identifiable responsible individuals having the capacity to make the decisions necessary to move forward with the community. I really like my job, and so we're not going to be using this power to buy the corporate Ferrari. right? We're still accountable. It gives us power to identifiable people, and then we have to report to you if it's used. We will not use it while you are competent. So this is a basic tool of governance. You are setting up, think of it as an insurance policy, and it's insurance on yourselves. That's what we're doing here. So right now, there are no planned expenditures. At the moment, the only costs I'm aware of that we've incurred are additional cleaning supplies, and over the arc of the year, it's sort of like stockpiling toilet paper. You're going to use the same amount over the course of the year, whether you have 10 cases in your house or half a case in your house, right? So we've bought a bunch of extra cleaning supplies, and we're slightly increasing, not slightly, we have increased the volume of cleaning. So a very, very modest expense that we can right now absorb in our operating budget. We have no large expenditures planned. We would not utilize that power because my job in particular is accountable for that. And presumably bad things would follow if unwise and inappropriate action were taken. We have the accountability mechanism built in. This might cause unease or anxiety, but it's only meant to be used in the event of catastrophe. Let's hope we avoid catastrophe. But it's worse if you don't enact that, and then we can't even do that, and you're gone, and we're incapable of doing anything, and what happens to the community then? This is the mechanism. This is the insurance policy. Please consider that as you review it.
Councillor Hahn?
So for that, in the case of not having enough councillors to have quorum, or just not having any councillors available?
I can only answer as the law currently stands. As the law currently stands, it's when you can't form a quorum. We're hoping the province makes some changes to that so that, assuming you were all still alive, you could participate electronically. Even if ill, you could participate electronically. This isn't meant to disenfranchise the elected officials. You're accountable to the public. We are not directly, staff aren't directly accountable. This is the safety mechanism so we can continue to operate. And regardless of how you vote today, in 2.5 years, we're going to put a very similar document in front of you for the lame duck status in the event that one happens. It doesn't always happen. So this is, I know why it seems scary. None of us want this to occur. I'd much prefer, ultimately, to never exercise the power.
Councillor Trophy.
Through you, Mayor Junkin, I thank you for that explanation. But you know how we can feel like we don't know, we can't see in the foreseeable future how this could be spent, and we just want to be in that comfort factor. Like you used the word several times in your presentation, you want us to be comfortable. We are accountable to the public, and we want to ensure that accountability. I noticed in a few of the other ones you had that the CEO and clerk and mayor would jointly sign. I just want to ensure that an elected official would have the signing authority as well. It probably qualifies under designates, but I just want to be clear in that.
Well, some of those items do include the mayor and some of them don't. As a practical matter, the administration needs to be able to function on as a business, which is we're a corporation as well. This bylaw, it might help if you think of this bylaw as being fundamentally a corporate document as opposed to one for the community. It's not a bylaw where we interact with the community. It's really to keep the corporation running in a sensible manner. That is built in some places. The bottom line is we changed the language a little bit here because in a pandemic we hope we all emerge unscathed, but we don't really know what that looks like. I'm not trying to stoke fear. We're just trying to responsibly set up insurance plans for operational continuity.
Understood. I just want that comfort factor that an elected official will be able to make the decision to spend over $25,000. If you had that mayor on there as well, then at least there's one elected official, if it can be in there. Just my opinion.
And council, the clerk would like to jump in here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to build on the CAO's comments, some of the provisions of the bylaw do in fact include the clerk and the mayor. Those are the provisions that are required under the Municipal Act for documents that are to be signed under corporate seal. So that is fully aligned with the Municipal Act in order for us to, for example, sign an agreement of purchase and sale. Then it does need the mayor and clerk to sign under corporate seal. That's what those provisions are outlining.
To spend over the $25,000, would it be a problem to have an elected official such as the mayor as authority in there as well?
Perhaps I can add some clarity as to what. So I've lived through a lame duck council, and there's plenty of there are public reports and video from my previous employment showing how that functioned. Reporting after the fact, emails to council explaining when power was, that delegated authority was being used and why, capacity to receive feedback, one-on-one email conversations to get guidance. That is how this administration would function. Again, I'm assuming there's some councillors to be accountable to, right? This is designed so that we can function in the absence of a council. That's what it's designed for. But if there are elected officials, then if there are enough elected officials, we won't be using the power at all. If there aren't enough elected officials, we would still, then you can't have a legal meeting. So we'll communicate with those capable of communicating back to us. There's an accountability mechanism, and ultimately you retain the capacity to execute the ultimate sanction on at least the chief of the office of the CAO. So all the accountability is built up. We would be telling you how that we were spending money and why, but for us to spend that level of money that isn't budgeted, there'd have to be a number of other things go seriously wrong. It would be self-evident to yourselves and every member of the community what was happening. We're talking about, building collapse or other things to get to that sort of dollar value on an operation our size. This is a route. I just need to reiterate this again because I don't want us to become the only one of 13 municipalities in Niagara that fails to pass the basic provision needed as an insurance policy, and I worry that we're on the verge of becoming so. This is a basic insurance policy. No one will be exercising this power if council remains competent. If council doesn't, we will do multiple accountability mechanisms. I'm happy to undertake that I would inform the media of our expenditures, in addition to any councillors still around. This is a minor routine item. I strongly encourage you to pass it. At some level, you have to have some degree of trust in the senior leadership team you have and employ to act if you're no longer capable of acting. That's just what this is. There has to be someone, ultimately it would be my office that's accountable and my career.
Any other comments? If not, maybe at this time I will ask if Councillor Hildebrand. Yes, go ahead, Councillor.
I'm not sure that I heard anything that was going on, but my comment is this. When we were elected, we were all elected because the trust factor. And to me, this dialogue is coming too soon, reacting to a situation that is yet to be determined. So in general, with several points here, I would not be approving. Not that I disagree with having the dialogue, but I just think it's too soon to approve these radical measures. Basically, as a new council, so as a new councilor, I will not be approving several of these items.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on number one? Councillor Lisa Hahn, sorry.
Mayor, I think that Councillor Hildebrand, because he can't hear Mr. Cribbs on the phone, for whatever reason, he said earlier he can't he can't hear, so I don't think he heard the explanation and that he knows that we're breaking it down necessarily 1 to 12. So I don't know if he can hear me, but apparently he can hear the clerk and yourself, so perhaps you can just relay that to him.
Clerk, do you want to make sure that Councillor Hildebrand realizes we're breaking this down one item at a time?
Councillor Hildebrand, it's Nancy. Just double checking.
I can hear the mayor and yourself perfectly clear.
Okay, so are you aware that there has been a request to divide the bylaw and vote on each section? You are aware of that?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what I would propose as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so without any, unless there is further questions, debate on number 1, I will be calling the vote. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, it doesn't directly relate to like any one item of the 12th. And I understand that whatever bylaw we do put into place, before it's enacted for this or some other emergency down the road, I would like a provision for this council or whatever councillor has that bylaw that they have to vote on it to put it into force for that time period.
Perhaps the clerk can give us clarity.
If I understand the councillor's question properly, through you, Mr. Mayor, we could put a section on the end that the bylaw shall be enforced for this term of council.
What do you say of this declared coronavirus? It's over, it's gone. Oh, yes.
It says during a period of a declared pandemic or similar emergency.
Yeah, relating to coronavirus, if we add those words? So, you forgive us, we did draft this fairly quickly. If we made amendments to paragraph 12, and struck out or other similar emergency, so of a declared pandemic relating to coronavirus, because this too shall pass. One day this will end, hopefully sooner rather than later. But this is not meant to be a power grab. It is an insurance policy.
Councillor Trophy.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I had that under number 12, so that's why I thought we're going through this line by line. So I don't know if you want to discuss that one now, or do you want to wait till we get to 12?
May I suggest you consider making that change so that perhaps it brings a degree of comfort in regard to all the others? It was meant to only apply to this pandemic. It's not meant to last. And the lame duck periods are easier because you know what day people are going to take office, so it's always a defined date. We don't have that here, but whenever the pandemic ends, this bylaw ceases to function.
Councillor Trophy.
I would prefer to wait till we get to 12 because there's a couple other little amendments I would like to make along the way, if possible, so that won't just speed it up.
Okay. Fire Chief, you had your hand up?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, if you're going to make a reference to the coronavirus, it's on. Corona is the general term. There's different coronaviruses, so we're going to refer to this pandemic, it's COVID-19.
Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO. So you gave us the explanation if everyone was sick, if some of us die, we need this in place for an insurance policy. If none of us get sick, none of us we all stay healthy, do we need to have this in place?
No, you do not.
So why are we going on the negative side?
Because like the lame duck provisions, you have to pass that while you're a competent council able to do so. You can't go and buy health insurance for a pre-existing condition when you have the condition. You have to make the arrangements while the sun is shining. Because we can't get, none of you, unfortunately, none of us can guarantee that this council can meet on the 23rd. Right now, we certainly think you can. That's why you decide while you're healthy.
Thank you. So now that I'm totally confused, so, Madam Clerk, so are we going to fix number 12, or are we going to go start at 1 and then go down?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, right now the motion is to divide, and we are on number 1. There is a suggestion by the CAO to consider number 12 as amended first, but right now the motion is for number 1.
Okay. So unless someone on council wants to put a motion to skip down to number 12, then we will continue doing this in numerical order, and I will call the question on number 1. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Council Hildebrand?
I prefer going through 1 through 12.
I believe the mayor's asking for your vote on number 1, paragraph 1.
My vote on number 1 is no.
Okay, so we will call the vote. Councilor Hildebrand jumped a bit, but we are going to call the vote right now. All those in favor of...
Mr. Mayor, there was a request for a recorded vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, so in that case, Madam Clerk, it's your call.
So Councillor Hildebrand was the first on the list, so I've already have his vote as no. Councillor Wink has left the meeting, so I will mark him as absent. Councillor Hahn, in favor of paragraph 1 or opposed?
In favor.
Councillor Stewart.
In favor.
Councillor Cholfi.
Yes, in favor.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
In favor.
Paragraph 1 is passed.
Okay. Thank you, Council. We will now go to number 2. I won't bother reading the preamble. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Hildebrand, are you with us still?
Yes, I am. I don't know what was happening, but I'm still here.
John Wink
Oh.
just signed in.
Councillor Wink is back? Okay. Councillor, shall I update
So are we
Councillor?
voting on number 1 yet?
Councillor Wink, we just voted on number 1. We're about to vote, about to discuss paragraph 2.
So what was the vote on number 1?
It was carried.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So now I'm going to vote, I'm going to read motion number 2, that the CAO and clerk or designates are jointly delegated the authority to extend and/or execute any current agreement of purchase and sale pertaining to the disposition of any real or personal property the Ware Council has previously authorized the sale. Any discussion, questions on this motion? Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mayor, in this particular case, is there anything still pending that would fall into this category for the foreseeable future, i.e. things we have discussed and closed? I realize I won't go into detail, but do you see that being an issue in the next 30 to 60 days?
Absolutely. As things currently stand, you're going in closed to hear 2 real property matters on the 23rd, assuming we have a meeting on the 23rd and you're capable of having a meeting on the 23rd. So there are at least 2 next week. It's entirely foreseeable that there will be more than 2, but there's 2 that I have constructive knowledge of at this time. They are matters you've been enclosed on previously. So this would allow us to extend or save those discussions should council become incompetent in the interim. There are 3 next week. My math is bad. But so you're enclosed for 3 real property matters. So this has a real and valid purpose.
Any other questions? Councilor Trophy?
Yeah, this is just a comment. I think it is important for this because these are properties that council has previously authorized the sale of, and this will indeed affect our bridge financing too. It has lots to do with that. So just making sure council is aware of that.
And I will now ask Councilor Wink, have you got any comments on number 2?
No, I have no problem with it.
Okay, thank you. And Councilor Hildebrand? Okay, any other comments? If not, I will call the vote. And again, this is a recorded vote, so Madam Clerk will do it.
Sorry, 3, Mr. Mayor. We are voting on Section 2 of the proposed bylaw. Councillor Hildebrand.
No.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Cholfie.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Paragraph 2 passes.
Okay. On to paragraph 3. That the mayor or the CAO and the clerk or designates are jointly appointed signing authority for all agreements pursuant to Article 5. Comments or questions on this? Councilor Trophy.
Can I just have a recap on Article 5? Sorry.
My apologies. That would be an amendment. It should be Article 2. For the agreements of purchase and sale, to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign agreements of purchase and sale. My apologies.
Thank you. That's what I thought it was going to be.
Any other questions on 3? Councilor Wink?
No, sir.
Okay, and Councilor Hildebrand?
Approved.
Okay, well, just a comment right now.
Okay.
Okay, no comments?
No comment.
Okay, thank you. And I'll call the vote, and the Madam Clerk will tally them up.
So this is with regard to Article 3 of the bylaw. Councillor Hildebrand.
Approved.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Cholfie.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes?
The vote carries.
Okay, as you heard, the vote on 3 carried. I will now read motion 4, that the CAO and the appropriate department director or designates are jointly delegated authority to proceed on any recommendation having received approval at either committee of the whole or the Policy and Priorities Committee, but not yet having obtained council ratification. Any comments or questions on this motion? Not seeing any in present councilors, I will ask Councilor Hildebrand.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, we are just taking comments, but no comments then?
No comments.
Okay, and Councilor Wink, any comments?
No comment.
Okay, well, one last time, any questions from the councilors present? Councilor Hahn?
Through you, Mayor, so just for clarity, so in this particular case, it's things that council has absolutely approved, want to move forward on, but we just haven't gone through that final piece of ratification, and that's what's outstanding, and this is what you're asking for, is just so that you can move forward on that.
So a good example, so you actually see cognitively how this works, would be gypsy moth spraying. Assuming you become incapacitated, for sake of argument, we can only proceed with, if we have this clause approved, we can proceed with gypsy moth spraying, which you dealt with as, right, council committee, things you approve as a committee, you've thought of once, at least, we could enact thereafter. Normally you look at everything twice, right? So that's kind of why that's there, so that things that you voted on once already, we can enact. This is the fail-safe on gypsy moth spraying is probably the best example I can give you, but it could be any number of things, because in the weeks to come, you're competent now. You may well be competent on the 23rd. We hope you remain competent throughout, obviously. But if all of a sudden you aren't, we could go forward on whatever future items you've approved once in principle. And only those items that you've already considered, elected people have considered.
But not seeing any questions, I will ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
This is with regard to section 4. Councillor Cholfi.
Yes. Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
No.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The vote carries.
Okay, the number 4 carried. Number 5 we will now do. That the CAO and/or the appropriate department directors or designates be authorized to approve work-from-home provisions for municipal staff and to authorize payroll-related matters as they relate to the specific pandemic or emergency situation. Comments or questions on motion number 5? Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mayor. So when we're talking about work from home, I just want to be very clear that when staff are working from home, they are in fact, they're given a list of tasks, and then whether it's every week or every few days, that director or supervisor, then it will be checking in to making sure those tasks are getting done. That there's a clear protocol that's going to be put in place. So there is still some monitoring of the amount of work that is being done that the town is going to be paying for prior to any layoffs. That's a certainty that it's not just the checking in every few weeks, but rather it's a weekly, or have you determined what type of basis it's going to be, daily, weekly? Can you give us some insight on that?
What we undertake to give you is our ongoing managerial competence. That's really what this comes down to. Essentially, work from home can only occur for certain white-collar occupations. Planning is a good example. One can write a planning report sitting at a computer, more or less wherever. There's a reason why we normally have those people in the office, because it's better to interact with development engineering, with the building officials, and there's sort of a team environment, et cetera, et cetera. So there are benefits to being in the office, obviously. That being said, that's quite different than, say, payroll, which, every 2 weeks there are, I think we're at 96 right now when you count all the part-times, but whatever exact count is today, 96 that either do get done or don't get done, and that's very easy to count because we always hear if someone doesn't get paid. So the reality of our business varies dramatically across the corporation. All I can say is that we are planning to try to keep the lights on and do everything necessary to ensure business continuity with the corporation. In a fundamental sense, it's the director's job to manage their respective divisions and portfolios. And it's fundamentally my job to ensure that they in turn are doing theirs. And we will all continue to do that as to the very best of our abilities. We will know right away if payroll's not being done properly, for example, or accounts are not being paid or receivables are not being paid. It actually shows up in our computer systems quite clearly. That's more of a challenge if you're told to write a new zoning bylaw, which is a year-long process and quite a lengthy thing. But we will manage to the best of our ability. We do every day, I hope. Certainly it's my goal to try to bring everyone to their fullest potential, and that won't stop.
And I understand that, but in the case that the department lead, the director, is ill, and you've got people working from home, to ensure that whoever the designate is that's taking over that role is in fact got some sort of responsibility of checking in on staff that are working from home, whether it's daily, weekly, some sort of protocol in place.
Then let me try that a different way. Many of our functions are done by sole people, and it becomes immediately apparent if he or she is not doing their work. Because when you're a department of one, the thing either happens or it doesn't. Human resources being an excellent example of that. We are all going to monitor our staff and our output and our productivity, and if this carries on for a long period of time, we anticipate that to go down as the number of staff goes down. But we are here to manage you pay us to manage the resources, to maximize them as best we can, and we intend to do so.
Any other comments? Councillor Trophy?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Junkin. With the payroll being done at somebody's home, is there any risk there with confidentiality or anything like that? You know, you could walk away from the laptop to go somewhere and leave it on and things like that, because there's social insurance numbers, even earnings, what's your confidentiality?
Well, we have, perhaps the treasurer might want to add to augment my answer, but we only have 2 people on staff who are fully competent to operate the payroll system. And so that's an excellent example of, we used to only have 1. We have we have already tested, and it is possible for both those people to log in remotely, but all that data remains on the corporate machines, and those staff are taking corporate machines home to do that work. They're not using their home systems that are less protected than the corporate security applies across that. And of course, their duties of confidentiality, their fiduciary duty, and their duties of loyalty don't change. And in the event of a breach, presumably there would be consequences. So we have the technology in place. We have good, loyal staff in place. We've already tested this to make sure this works. We're fully confident, but and we're going to do the best we can.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is as of now, one of the employees working out of the MCC and one is in this building, so they are separated?
That's correct.
Okay. Without seeing any other questions on the councillors present, I will now ask Councillor Hildebrand, do you have any comments on motion 5? Okay, and Councillor Wink, any comments on motion 5?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Not seeing any raised hands from the councillors present, I will call the clerk will call the vote on motion 5.
Councillor Cholfi,
Yes, in favor?
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand,
Approved.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries for paragraph 5.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Motion 5 has carried, and we will now move on to motion 6. Motion 6 is that the CAO and the appropriate department directors or designates be authorized to eliminate the appearance of delegations before council, save and accept delegations that are related to a specific mandated corporate business, and that any such delegation be limited to 1 representative. Comments or questions on this motion? Councillor Trophy.
Yes, I'd like to add that 1 delegate from the Cannabis Control Committee should be allowed during their presentations, in that they would be able to possibly provide a delegation through Skype if they're not able to attend, because if they get the virus.
Are you putting that forward as a motion or as an amendment?
Yes, please.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would need a seconder on that motion if you wanted to specifically outline the Cannabis Control Committee. The Article 6 was written with the Cannabis Control Committee in mind.
I just want to ensure that just in case they get the virus and they're quarantined for 14 days, that they be available through Skype or electronic means or anything like that as well.
So if there's a seconder for that amendment,
I'll
we can
second
put
it.
that forward. Councillor
Okay.
Kaur.
First of all, then, discussion on the amendment. Councillor Hildebrand, did you hear the amendment to number 6?
Yes, I did.
Okay, any questions?
None.
Okay, Councillor Wink, any questions on the amendment to number 6?
Yeah, I have a question. So you've got roughly 10 people on the CCC, and if one person cannot show, someone else can take his place. I don't know why we need to accept it through Skype.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chofie is going to answer.
Yeah, that could be an option that another person takes his place, but I think the chair of our CCC committee is well suited for that position, and it allows him the option to speak if the committee deems that they would prefer for him to speak.
Any further questions, Councillor Wink?
Now, he's one person, so similar to what we're doing, we've got policy, like, this is more or less an insurance policy. Surely there's someone else on the committee that would be able to represent the chair of the committee.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Councillor Chofie, you want to address?
Yeah, that's, like I said, that we're not ruling that out, but we just want to have an opportunity in case he does want to speak. It doesn't cost the town anything, it's just via electronic means, and we have the equipment here at Town Hall to do so.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on the amendment put forward on motion 6? Not seeing any, I will call the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? I'm sorry? Yeah. Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Okay, and Councillor Wink. We didn't have to do a recorded vote on that, did we?
Through Mr. Mayor, I believe it would be by recorded vote because every one has been requested as recorded vote, so I'm happy to conduct that.
Okay, sorry. Over to the clerk.
For the record, we're voting on the amendment only. Councillor Chofie.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes?
The amendment carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So now we're back to the original motion, amended motion. Any other questions on the amended motion before us? Councillor Hildebrand, any questions on the amended motion?
No.
Okay, Councillor Wink?
No, sir.
Okay, do not see any raised hands and ones present, so Madam Clerk will call the vote.
This is on paragraph 6 as amended. Councillor Chofie.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Counselor Stewart,
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion as amended carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And motion number 6 carries.
We now move on to motion 7. That all standing committee meetings, such as Committee of the Whole and Policy and Priorities Committee, be suspended for the duration of the pandemic or emergency period, or as advised by the corporation's Community Emergency Management Coordinator, CMMC, and in consultation with the senior leadership team, and that only matters of a time-sensitive nature be presented to council. Questions or comments on motion 7? Councilor Hahn?
Through you, Mayor. So I noticed, just looking at the 23rd for the council minutes, there were some items on there like some zoning changes. Does that somehow qualify? Because it says matters of time sensitive, and it seems like it should be only urgent things that we're really considering during this period of time. So would that be amended, or I guess I'm looking for an explanation to why that's on there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this article would be just to ensure efficiency in our meetings. So if we are in a situation, we thought it would be more prudent just to bring matters that are a time-sensitive nature or that absolutely require a council approval to a council directly, as opposed to council and then committee.
So my preference would be that during this time, if we're going through all this, and obviously it's a pandemic, items such as like Quaker Road rezoning that's just not urgent at this state. The state of affairs is just, it doesn't seem like that things like that would belong. We're talking about whether we're not even going to make it to the 23rd and so on and so forth. So then if we do, items that are pressing, really seriously pressing, and I'm sure that really qualifies, in my opinion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the agendas for March 23rd were released already prior to consideration of this bylaw. So the agendas for the 23rd are under the presumption that we will be meeting as council and committee.
Any other questions? Councilor Trophy.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So number 7, just and only matters of time-sensitive nature to be presented to council. And I just want to reiterate that the interim control bylaw will be in front of us by July 15th. So those issues will still move forward if they have to come to policy and priorities, correct?
Yes, that is correct. The council, you always control your own process. Assuming you're competent to act, you always control your own process. We do already have the 23rd set up, but assuming we get to the 23rd and we're all capable of having a meeting, you can remove items from the agenda, defer them to, sine die to some day in the future, whatever that happens to be. We were complying with the law as it stands, and we did that prior to the virus being quite as serious a health threat as it is now. We're very clear on what constitutes critical corporate business, and aside from this virus, which right now is the critical corporate business, the number one community issue is cannabis. We are abundantly clear on that.
Thank you. I just want to make sure, and that comfort factor.
Any other comments, questions? If not, I will go to the other two councillors coming in. So, Councillor Hildebrand, any comments, questions on motion 7? Okay, and Councillor Wink, any comment, questions on the 7?
No, my questions have been answered.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to the chambers. Any other questions or comments before we call the vote? Not seeing any. I will call on the clerk, please.
This is the vote on Article 7 of the proposed bylaw. Councillor Cholfi.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Article 7 passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. As the clerk has stated, Article 7 has carried. We now move to motion 8. That unless otherwise proclaimed by the Province of Ontario and in accordance with the Act, council meetings shall achieve a quorum of no fewer than 4 members physically present, while 3 members may attend through electronic means, and meetings shall be live streamed for the viewing public, whereas the public is prohibited from personal attendance. Any comments or questions on motion 8? Seeing none for those present, I will ask Councillor Hildebrand, any comments on section 8? Councillor Wink?
No.
Thank you. Not seeing any in the chambers, I will ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
This is with regard to Article 8. Councillor Cholfi.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Article 8 is carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Article 8 has carried. We will now move to Article 9. That the Chief Administrative Officer be and is hereby appointed as a deputy clerk with all of the duties and responsibilities of the clerk in his/her absence. Any discussion or questions on Article 9? Councillor Trophy.
Yeah, just to make it clear, so by allowing this, we would have 3, correct? Holly, Nancy, and yourself. Correct. Thank you.
Any other questions from those present? Not seeing any. I will ask Councillor Hildebrand, any comment on Article 9? Okay. Councillor Wink, any comment on Article 9?
No.
Not seeing any show of hands in the chamber, we will ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
With regard to Article 9, Councillor Cholfi.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
No.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes. Yes.
Article 9 is carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Article 9 has carried. We move on to Article 10. That the mayor and clerk or designates be authorized to execute any agreements previously reported to council that may not yet been ratified through bylaw. Any comments or questions on number 10? Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mayor, just wondering what the difference is between that and number 4. So in number 4, it was very similar. That was what I was asking about. And this one is strikingly similar. What is the real difference here?
We probably should have put them side by each. They're to be read conjunctively, in short answer to you. Sorry, where are we? 10 says actual agreements, i.e. contracts, whereas 4 could be you endorse a policy or something that isn't necessarily that. But the point between them is that we would enact your will after you indicate, if in the event you do sit as a committee, you indicate, a majority of you indicate support for a proposition. Madam Clerk has something she'd like to add, I'm sure, but the bottom line is that they are very similar, and they are, in my mind, conjunctive.
And the clerk would like to perhaps clarify also.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. To answer the councillor's question, this one is envisioned with regard to, for example, some agreements with Her Majesty regarding grant payments and agreements that we are required to sign. You will see that on the agenda for the 23rd, there are 4 such agreements. Council is aware of the grant opportunities, but the province is requiring the agreements to be signed. This would authorize proceeding with that. Should we not be able to meet on the 23rd, we could still comply with the grant requirements to sign those agreements. That's what's envisioned by this article.
Any other questions? Then I will go to the 2 absentees. Councillor Hildebrand, any comments on number 10? Okay, and Councillor Wink, any questions or comments on Article 10?
No, sir.
Thank you. We will now ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
Article 10 of the proposed bylaw, Councillor Cholfi.
No.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
No.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Article 10 is carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Article 10 has carried. Move on to Article 11, that the CAO shall report to Council on any actions taken under the provisions of this bylaw. Questions and comments on number 11? Not seeing any. I will ask Councillor Hildebrand, any comments on number 11?
Say no to this.
And Councillor Wink, any comments on Article 11?
No.
Thank you. We will ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
With regard to Article 11 of the proposed bylaw, Councillor Cholfi.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
No.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Article 11 is carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Article 11 carried. We will now move on to the last, Article 12, that this bylaw shall take effect immediately and remain in force only during a period of a declared pandemic or other similar emergency. Any comments or questions? Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mayor, so this is the one we talked about earlier where we were going to stop the sentence at during a period of declared pandemic and the COVID-19, correct? So we're going to remove the words or other similar emergency.
Okay. And Madam Clerk, will you please make that change?
So I have a motion for amendment on the floor moved by Councillor Hahn. I need a seconder.
Councillor Trophy.
And you would call for discussion on the amendment.
Okay, any discussion, questions on the amendment? Councillor Trophy.
Can the clerk please read it out again?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that the amendment read that the Article 12 be revised by removing the words "or other similar emergency" and replacing them with "pandemic" being the novel coronavirus COVID-19.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the amendment? Councillor Hildebrand?
for the explanation.
Thank you. Councillor Wink?
No.
Thank you. We will now vote on the amendment. We'll ask the clerk to do so.
This relates to the amendment regarding Article 12. Councillor Cholfi.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The amendment is carried. Mr. Mayor, the motion now on the floor is Article 12 as amended.
Any discussion on the 12 as it stands, as amended? I will, Councillor Hildebrand, any comments on Article 12 as amended? Councillor Wink, any comments as amended?
No.
Thank you. We will now ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
Article 12 as amended. Councillor Cholfi.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
No.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Article 12 as amended is carried.
Thank you. So now, consideration of bylaws. Motion, I'm sorry?
So you've done that? So
Oh, so now we're confirming. Oh. This one. Yes. Motion put forward by Councillor Cholfi, seconded by Councillor Kaur, confirming a bylaw. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed, being a bylaw number 4216, 2020, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its special meeting held on the 17th day of March 2020. Any comments, questions? Any comments, Councillor Hildebrand? Any comments, Councillor Wink?
No.
Then I will call the vote. All those in favor, all those in favor? All those against? Councillor Hildebrand? And Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, motion put forward by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that this special meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for March 23rd, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. All those in favor? All those are against? Councillor Hildebrand? Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.
So we're going to have the Skype working so you can see from the big screens. I'm going to send you in. Please feel free to think or talk amongst yourselves. We